Hi, I'm Steven with LedgerGurus, and in this video, I'm going to do a review of the top news for e-commerce finance for January 2026. This is something new that we're going to do as a companion to our weekly email newsletter. But in this case, I'm going to highlight a couple of key points from the past month, why I think they're relevant, and go a little bit deeper than I do on the email newsletter. Today, I'm going to go over a lot of points that I made from the e-commerce finance podcast where we did some 2026 predictions. So if you want to listen to some of the thoughts about what I think is going to happen in 2026, go listen to that. That's the first episode of the year. Again, the e-commerce finance podcast. So the first one is around interest rates. The US Federal Reserve recently said that they are going to pause further rate cuts while they watch job data and inflation data. Now, this is something that I talked about in my 2026 predictions, which is I do think that rates are going to go down, but it does look like we might be on hold for a while. So why does this matter to an e-commerce seller? A lot of interest rates are based on the federal funds rate, which is set by the Federal Reserve. And so any lending rates for those type of loans may be impacted. They're not going to go down. I think a bigger issue is interest rates for consumers, particularly like credit cards, are still going to be higher, and that's going to limit their ability to spend. Not a big issue here. It's just more of the same, but something that I'm continuing to keep my eye on. Another report was that consumer confidence had plummeted to the lowest levels since 2014. Now, before you go out and panic, I would say that consumer confidence has been really down in 2025, and yet spending has not. So my real question is, if consumer confidence is down, will they still spend? Let's think about it. Why is it down? There is a lot of uncertainty and chaos in the world. Between the tariffs, between some of the issues we have around immigration here in the US, between international relationships, between job insecurity around AI, we're all feeling nervous. And with that, I think is a lower consumer confidence. But I'm not too concerned because people are going to spend as long as they have the money and they have the jobs. The bigger issue I have is around inflation and the people's ability to spend. Now, on the note of tariffs, one of the things I talked about in my 2026 predictions was targeted political tariffs. And we've seen a lot of that since we released the episode. We've seen threats of tariffs against South Korea for not upholding their end of the bargain. We've seen threats against Canada for relationships they're having with China. We've seen threats against Nordic European countries who are supporting Greenland. In most cases, these threats look like they are not going to hold. But again, my concern around tariffs is it's becoming a political tool as much as an economic tool. If you are importing from one of these places and get caught up in a huge tariff spike while things get resolved, you may find yourself paying a huge bill. Now, I think in general, these tariff spikes are going to be short-term or maybe not materialize at all. But if you had an order that happened to come through customs at the wrong time, you might find yourself with a huge bill that you weren't expecting. So supply chain management is going to be really critical. It's really hard for smaller sellers like the ones we work with. Generally, I would say go get a bonded warehouse where you could take that inventory, put it there, and then take it out when the tariffs are lower. But there is some added cost to going into a bonded warehouse. But as we find ourselves in a more volatile political environment, it may make sense if you are importing from a potentially politically tricky country to be using bonded warehouses as a strategy. What are the politically tricky countries? To be honest, it feels like the whole world. Now let's talk about some good news. I've got two things that I'm really excited about. The first is TikTok is now an American company. There was a lot of concern around TikTok being owned by Chinese. President Trump came into office and said he was going to resolve things because the people want TikTok. That alleviated some concerns, but there was still this law around TikTok needing US ownership. That has now closed, meaning that TikTok's future is more or less secure. What does that mean for e-commerce? If you're on the fence about TikTok because of politics, I wouldn't worry about it anymore. We're seeing a lot of opportunity in TikTok. TikTok Shop is now as big as eBay, and it is the pioneer of social commerce. And so if you're on the fence, I'd say jump in. It looks really positive. My final point of news that I'm most excited about is around agentic commerce or AI commerce, however you want to call it. Shopify has dropped some interesting news this past month. Shopify is enabling all of their stores for agentic commerce, where you could have your products available on ChatGPT, Google Gemini, or Google AI mode, or Microsoft Copilot. Essentially, if you haven't done AI shopping, you search for a product, you find it, and the checkout will be in those chat tools. Integrated with Shopify, you'll take a fee out of that, and you'll have the transaction seamless. I'm very excited about these because so much time is being spent on AI chat, and I think it's a natural evolution to where there's going to be more shopping on these platforms. It looks like Shopify is rolling this out, so it's not to every storefront, but you will be able to have the ability to opt in or out of agentic shopping. I'm of the position that everybody should be looking at this, preparing for this, testing for this. This is going to come down to good product listings and making sure your store is enabled. Now, in addition to that, they also announced something really cool, the Universal Commerce Protocol. Essentially, they're going to enable agentic shopping if you're not on Shopify, which is really awesome. You don't have to wait for BigCommerce or WooCommerce or whatever that one-off store is that you have. They are going to make it so that you can integrate those platforms to those AI agents or AI chatbots and have that transaction experience. We're still very early in this evolution, but I think when we get to the end of this year, it's going to be a very interesting landscape. Final note, ChatGPT also announced that they are going to get into the ad game. This was one of my predictions. Right now, the articles that I'm reading are saying it's going to be very expensive to advertise on that platform. I'm sure that will go down over time, and I think when it does, it's going to be another great avenue for e-commerce businesses to promote their products. If you like these insights, subscribe to our email newsletter with the link below, and subscribe to the channel where I'm going to be doing these monthly summaries of the news that I find most valuable for e-commerce.